The first time that I played Dark Souls was in 2013. I remember because it was the year I graduated high school. In my freshman year of college, a friend of mine that I had known for quite some time came up and suggested the game to me. He mentioned that it was kind of hard, but he didn't talk about it like it was the most difficult thing ever, but he really thought that I would like it because I'm a really big fan of RPG games. So I brought it home and I gave it a try. Now, I would love to tell you that I fell in love with Dark Souls the very first time that I played it, but that simply wasn't the case. I remember starting out and getting through a little bit of the game, dying a lot, starting to get kind of frustrated, and eventually I got to a point where I was thinking that the game was cheap or tricking me, or that the difficulty was artificial, and these were thoughts that I was having a lot during my first playthrough with the game. And I actually got to the Capra Demon boss fight, which isn't that far into the game, and gave up. I put the game down for about 3-4 months, and then I just went and did other things. One day I was just bored and sitting around, and I thought to myself, that Dark Souls game, it was kind of fun, and I really liked the fantasy element of it, but I don't know, man, just those bosses were really difficult. I decided to boot it up and give it another go just to see what would happen. I had actually deleted my first character the first time I quit the game, so when I came back, I had to start over from the beginning. And I actually think that this was a really positive and beneficial thing for me when trying to understand the Dark Souls, Souls-like experience at the time. Because once you've experienced some of the difficulty and things that Dark Souls has for you, like enemies around corners, or, certain ways of attacking that you're not used to, or groups of enemies, you get a feel for what that's going to be like later in the game. And when you have the chance to go back and re-experience some of the ones that you've already done, it really helps solidify those patterns in your mind. So I ran through the first part of the game again. I went through, fought a few of the bosses, and then I got back to the Capra Demon, and it was still really difficult for me. I had a different mindset this time, where now I wanted to go a little bit slower, take my time, and actually what I was really thinking at the time was that I just wanted to enjoy the game. I wanted to level up, maybe even go over level if I needed to, explore around, try different things, try out a bunch of different weapons, and eventually I broke through the barrier that was the Capra Demon. For me, this was actually a really satisfying feeling. Like, this boss that had been bad enough for me to want to quit the game months ago, not only because the boss itself was difficult and annoying with the dogs in the room, but you had to run this huge path to get to it, past all these enemies. Beating that and overcoming that difficulty through trying different things, through finding weapons that I like, through trying a different build, really learning the mechanics of the game, was something extremely satisfying to me. And that was my first experience with the Souls-like satisfaction. And I would consider myself someone who games a lot more than the average person. I don't know if you want to say hardcore gamer, because I think that's kind of a meaningless term, but I definitely am in probably the top 10% of the amount of time that I play video games of people in the world. And it was still kind of difficult for me. So I understand, and I'm sympathetic and empathetic towards people who might be towards the average end of video game playtime and enjoyment, who may not immediately want to jump into something like Dark Souls or Elden Ring that people have told them can be difficult, challenging, and has moments like this that you have to overcome through ingenuity, and you have to find a way to push through this adversity. What I think really makes people hesitant, though, about Souls games is they think of them as just difficult. Like, difficulty is the reason to be playing these games. When in reality, I actually don't think that Souls games are that difficult once you really get to the root and essence of what they are. Like, for me, I know that getting through the hardest difficulty on some of the newer God of War games was a harder experience than getting through Elden Ring or Dark Souls. And it's because there's lesser ways for you to alter your playstyle or go level up or approach the situation differently than doing things in Dark Souls or Elden Ring. Or I can even think of some of the older Halo games on their harder difficulties being a more difficult and frustrating experience than getting through Dark Souls or Elden Ring. And I think that's what really makes the Souls games amazing, is that it's not just hard for hard's sake. It's a very specific and tailored level of difficulty that allows for players to approach the problems in their own way. It allows for them to go do whatever they want in the world to get through that problem, whether it's finding a new weapon or summoning a partner, or again, like I mentioned earlier, even if you need to look up a guide to figure out how to block the moves. I don't think there's really a wrong way to play these games, and that's something I talked about in my last video. But what I'm really trying to talk about here, though, is that I think that the average person overestimates how hard the Souls games actually are. When I think back to my experience with the Capper Demon and how I thought it was so difficult that it made me want to quit the game, I really get the perspective now that it wasn't actually that difficult of a fight. Like, if you approach that specific boss fight with like a sword and a shield, and you're patient until you kill the dogs, and then you just fight the Capper Demon like a normal enemy, he only has like 2 attacks. Like, it's really not that scary of a fight. It's really just the closed space and the 2 dogs that make it hard. But if you approach the situation with strategy and understanding, the difficulty really isn't there. And the older Souls games in particular aren't really that hard. Like, the bosses attack kind of slow, you can roll through almost everything, blocking is perfectly viable. These are all strategies that work in these games. But what Dark Souls does is punish you for trying to treat the game like any other like hack and slash RPG, like Skyrim or something, where you can just run up to the enemies and chip away at them because you're some super powerful Uber character, and it doesn't work like that. A lot of this is what I really think makes the Souls genre unique and interesting to play, is that it's a new perspective and take on the RPG style. At least it was new at the time. Now it's been done quite a bit, and there's a lot of people who are copying it. But when you think of games like God of War or even Skyrim, where you pump the difficulty up to the highest because you want to experience a difficult game, all it really does is make the multipliers for the enemy's health and damage more. It doesn't actually make the game inherently more difficult to play outside of just making it more annoying and time consuming. The enemies become damage sponges and you have to like waste a bunch of time fighting them. Whereas in Souls games, in Elden Ring, you never really come across that. There's never really a point where you're like, wow, this boss just has so much health that it's going to take me forever. Unless you're doing some sort of challenge run where you're underleveled or your gear isn't, appropriate for the fight that you're doing. If you're progressing through the Souls games at a decent enough pace, you should be noticing that almost every boss you fight, when you hit them, their health goes down roughly the same proportionate amount. And then when you get to the end game, it'll start to go up and up and up as you do even more damage and start to optimize your build even more and more. Of course, there's going to be bosses who are like resistant to your damage types. If you fight Renala with magic, you're not going to do very much damage. But for the most part, you kind of tend to scale with the game, and a lot of the game's health and damage values are scaled to where they think you're going to be at that point in the game. I know I'm getting a little off topic here when it comes to talking about how Souls games aren't just for hardcore gamers. And look, there's a million reasons under the sun why you might think that these Souls games are too hard for you. Whether maybe you're a full-time student, I am a full-time student as well, or you're a parent, and I understand I'm a parent to a 9-month-old myself. We have our own boss battles in life. Maybe you just think you're not very skilled of a gamer and that it's going to be too hard for you and that you're not going to be able to do it. And this is something that I actually seen reflected occasionally on like Reddit or other sites as well. Well, I want to encourage you today, if you're someone who's listening who hasn't really given the Souls games a chance, or you've given them a chance and you found them frustrating at first, go back, give it a shot, or try it for the first time if you haven't. I promise you that the most average of gamers can get through a Souls game. Now, I want to be perfectly clear that I don't think Souls games are for everyone. Say, for example, my wife. She is the type of person who plays Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley. Am I going to recommend her to play Dark Souls? No, I don't think she's going to enjoy it. She doesn't like action-focused games. She doesn't like combat. And the difficulty is going to be way over her head because she can barely control the analog stick. But what I am saying is that the average person who plays any type of role-playing game, who plays any type of action game, I would say, can get through the Souls games. Especially the later ones like Elden Ring, because they're a lot more accessible and they have a lot more options for you to do what you want to be doing. So I want to encourage you to really give these games a chance if you haven't already. What I think is most important about giving Souls games a chance, though, is going in with an open mind. Being willing to give them a chance, even if there are walls of difficulty. And realizing that if you come across a wall of difficulty, it might not actually be the difficulty of the situation that is the problem. It might just be that you need to go explore somewhere else, make your character stronger, find new gear, use a summon. There's 100,000 different ways that you can approach every situation in Souls games. And that's really what the Souls games are about, or finding your way to get through those problems. And I know I've talked that point to death, but I really think that's the very essence of these games compared to just the difficulty. And when we talk about the difficulty and overhype it, we're really pushing away these players who I think really could enjoy this game and get to feel that immense sense of satisfaction of overcoming something that was originally a barrier to them. For me, that moment was the Capra Demon, and that's when the Souls games clicked. I became a Souls fanboy essentially right after that point. I cleared all the way through Dark Souls 1. I 100%ed Dark Souls 2. When Scholar of the First Sin came out, I 100%ed that as well. I love the Souls games now, and I really think they're something fantastic that is going to not only be a very positive experience for you, but it's going to be a rewarding experience for players. And I think that the average gamer can and should experience this as well if they feel up to it. It's something that is not just limited to hardcore gamers who are sitting at their computer for 15 hours a day. Average people can enjoy these games too, and I think that they may even get more satisfaction than the hardcore players, because the hardcore players are already kind of used to things that are semi-difficult, and it's not going to be as much of a problem for them. The average person is going to feel much better and more accomplished. Like if you go watch videos of people beating the Tree Sentinel on their new characters when they first play Elden Ring, there's this huge sense of gratification. And it's because they overcame something themselves. They found a solution to a problem, whether it was fighting it head on right as they came out the gate, or whether it was going and leveling up and coming back. That's the beauty of the Souls games, is getting through adversity and problems your way. I don't think that is something that only hardcore gamers have the pleasure of experiencing. Thanks for watching.